Welcome back to another episode of Why Are We Like This, the podcast that treats Florida like the active crime scene it is. I am your host, David Quinones. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Gerald Dougherty. Tomas Kennedy is on PTO today. Gerald, what's up, man?
Doing okay. We are no tea, all natty today.
No tea, all natty. So, right into our main topic this week. In 2007, if you were around, you might remember that Apple released the first iPhone that year. And for the first time, it became possible for the average person driving down the street to record and upload high definition video with their phone right there in their pocket. And this kind of birthed the generation of citizen journalists seeking transparency, accountability, and for some of the more unscrupulous monetary settlements from the police that would not know how to act and react to them by capturing just a plethora of abuses of law enforcement on camera, enough that this is today a subgenre on most social media platforms. Coincidentally, in 2007, it was also the year that a Miami professional photojournalist was arrested by the Miami police while on assignment in the Biscayne corridor for the crime of photographing the police, a legally protected activity. That journalist, Carlos Miller, would go on to fight those charges and win. He would also go on to found the outlet Photography is Not a Crime, colloquially known as PNAC. For 15 years, PNAC would serve as not only an outlet for Miller's reporting on police abuses and his own efforts to combat the stifling tactics that police would use to avoid public accountability, it also became a national sort of crowdsourced resource aimed at spreading awareness that no, photography is not a crime. You can film the police. Police do not enjoy any special expectation of privacy when they're operating in the public.
Today, PNAC is decommissioned, but its legacy lives on as a catalyst for the First Amendment Auditor movement that today is sometimes noble, sometimes crassly cynical, but whose existence undoubtedly played a large role in adding transparency to law enforcement abuses. It has also led to legislative blowback in the form of new draconian measures, such as Florida's recently enacted HALO law, a blow against the effort to make law enforcement accountable that was passed under the guise of protecting first responders doing their jobs. Today, under HALO, Miller's constitutionally protected actions on Biscayne Boulevard in 2007 would have been illegal. So today we're joined by PNAC's founder and fellow Miamian, our close friend, Carlos Miller. Carlos, welcome to Why Are We Like This?
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. Carlos, I want to get to your thoughts on this awful law and try to focus in on that because that's sort of the news hook for having you on. But first, I have sort of a broader question for you. It's been a few years since the last time you and I talked, and I interviewed you on my own now defunct podcast, Bird Road. And in that time, we've seen an explosion of the First Amendment Auditor sort of citizen journalist movement. As I mentioned in the intro, you could maybe argue that this movement was bound to happen as technology progressed and more people had high definition cameras on them. But it seems like the kind of thing that would have happened, but you were the pioneer of this. What are your thoughts? I'm wondering, as you look back and you see all of this entire like vertical of content that you kind of maybe unintentionally birthed. But what are your thoughts as you look at this? You're a young guy to be talking about a legacy, but like you have a legacy here.
Okay. What happened was in 2007, I was on assignment and I took some pictures of cops on Biscayne Boulevard doing an arrest. And I was actually across the street. I was actually using a telephoto lens. So I think I was more than 25 feet away. And I was doing that because I had been taking pictures on the streets and cops were always like, you leave. And I always knew I had the right, but I would leave because I wouldn't want to get arrested. But that night I wasn't on assignment and I said, well, I'm going to stand up. And they said, leave. I said, no. And then they just beat me up. They bashed my head into the pavement. I was thrown in jail and that started my website. And I did not expect the website to last long. I expected to win my case in court. And then I was figured after that, I'll use my website for a photo portfolio or whatever. And I was convicted of resisting arrest, because even though I was acquitted of all the other charges, and I appealed that and I had that reversed because the judge allowed improper evidence. The judge turned out to be a former police union attorney a year before that, which I did not know. And he accused me of being biased, but he was the one that was biased. So I had that reversed, and then I was arrested again in 2009 by Miami Beach PD during Memorial Day weekend when I was actually photographing what happens on Memorial Day weekend on South Beach. And I was arrested again in 2010 In 12, during the Occupy Miami evictions from Government Center, and I was arrested again in 2013 on the Metro Rail
I
for
remember the
taking
Metro
pictures.
Rail. Yeah, that
And
was
I
a
got dragged down the escalator on by a chokehold. I beat all those cases, and I actually got a settlement for the Metro Rail thing. And then in 2010, one of the incidents where I was not arrested, almost arrested, I was in a Metro Rail taking pictures, or actually shooting video and taking pictures with another guy to test out the law. We knew the law, but testing out the response to the law. And the cops came, and it was a big deal. And I was live tweeting it, and I was putting it up on video, tweeting it at the time. And that is what inspired the auditing movement, because there was a guy named Jeff Gray who runs Honor Your Oath, who in my opinion is probably the best auditor out there. He's very calm, cool, and collected. He started his YouTube channel in January of 2011. He said he was inspired by that video in the summer of 2010. So that's how the whole auditing thing, and then people were inspired by him. So now we have generation after generation. We have several generations of auditors. A lot of these auditors have no idea who I am, probably. The early generations knew who I was, but now they're like, "Who's this guy?" Because I've been keeping a low profile, and I've just been doing my work. And ever since the Metro Rail incident in 2015, I was left very, very traumatized. They choked me. I mean, it's on video. I thought I was going to die.
The Metro Rail incident was, and it's still out there for folks that want to find it. It was a really graphic abuse. And it was, of all the things and all the times that you photographed your interactions with police, I feel like that one, and I don't know, I'd love to hear from you. Did they know who you were? Was there like animus behind, like, oh, this is that Carlos Miller guy? Because that one seemed really targeted, and like there was very quick trigger on their part if you go back and rewatch that video.
Yeah, it's funny because I had a pending lawsuit against the Metro Rail at that time. And I was just with a friend, and we were taking pictures of the county courthouse. And then they came, and one guy confronted me, and I tried to tell him, "Look, do you know who I am? I don't want to be like, oh, do you know who I am?
Right.
Like I'm such a badass. But I'm like, do you actually know what's going on?" And he goes, "I don't care who you are." Okay, so I left it at that. I'm not going to push it. And then other guards came, and then I don't know if they knew who I was, but they dragged me down, and I thought I was going to die. The cops who showed up did know who I was because it was Miami-Dade PD. And I had just beat Nancy Perez, their major, who had me arrested the year before in court. So they all knew who I was. The cops did. And I'm not sure the security guards did, but that security firm, 50 State, is actually owned by a former Miami-Dade cop. And it's, the reaction from the public was like, this was my fault, like the mainstream society.
Yeah.
Like, how dare you question these guards over their unlawful orders, which is what it was. The guy was telling me, you can't photograph the train tracks. This is 2000 and was it 13 or 14?
Yeah.
And so at the time, people weren't really, it wasn't like today where everyone has their camera and neither. And I was like, well, we're so important about the tracks and you can't do that. I go, what law? Then, I got dragged down in a chokehold. I thought I was going to die. And I just don't do this. That's the last time I actually went out there and started testing the police or these guards on the right to record, because I don't want to die. I don't want to die. I've already been abused and arrested and had my career pretty much destroyed. And for what? And just here we are. Now they're passing this law. They passed this new law. And it's all a result of that. It's all because of the work I did, the work of the auditors did. It's all because of that. It's all because technology now gives the citizen the power to record. And what technology did was allow citizens to see the true nature of police, where before most Americans were like, oh, Hollywood police, Starsky and Hutch and Miami Vice and all these.
I remember a lot of the criticism that you would get in Facebook comments or in social media, were people saying, well, he had to have been doing something. He had to have instigated this or started this. And you still see a lot of that. Gerald, I think that one of the things that our younger listeners might not remember from this era, that might not be immediately obvious about the history of what Carlos was doing, is that it was in an era before Freddie Gray. It was before George Floyd. Many of those other killings where police were captured on camera and were collectively responsible, attempted to be held collectively responsible by assorted movements. But Carlos, you started PNAC during a time when like 9/11 was still very fresh. Cops were still unquestioningly valorized as heroes. Police kind of enjoyed like very unambiguous support. And at the time, it was very unfashionable to raise your hand and criticize them and say, hey, no, they're not doing their job right. I'm wondering, before we focus on the Halo law, can you talk a little bit about that must have been really daunting and very unpopular position to take at that time, and to turn into like your cause that you
It
did.
was because it was 9/11, and so they had all this Patriot Act and all that, and the cops. This is the problem why I got arrested, because before that, as I mentioned, I had been harassed and told you can't record, you can't take pictures. I was just taking still photos at the time, and because you could be a terrorist, that was their excuse. You're taking pictures with this long lens because you're going to go back home and plan your terrorism activity, which doesn't make sense at all. And so everyone's, oh yeah, they're buying into that because people are buying into what the police say. And I'm saying, look, that's stupid. That doesn't make sense. Like, if I was a terrorist, I'm not going to be very obvious with a big old lens. I'm not. I mean, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. And just in TV, okay, we're going to take pictures. So it was always that. And then, but slowly, people started seeing it. I mean, my critics in the very beginning actually turned into supporters. A lot of them did. They're like, I didn't believe you. But then you see video after video after video after video. After a while, it's like, well, you're right. You're right. I mean, they say, Carlos, I know you have anger issues over this issue. I do, because I'm traumatized over getting beat up. And I'm angry about seeing everyone else go through this. But I was true. I was being honest. I would, PINAC would not have lasted 15 years if I had been lying, if I had been libeling police, if I had been making stories up. No, I would have been sued from the very beginning. And they tried, but they never. And I know from people telling me that lawyers would not take their cases because they didn't have a case. And so, eventually it just got too big. It got very big. Eventually the technology advanced. And even in 2007, the iPhone did not have a video camera. That didn't come out till 2010.
Yeah.
That's right.
You had the BlackBerry. The BlackBerry sucked as a video camera. It was horrible.
Those were email devices, basically.
Yeah. They were horrible. And video, started getting, I bought a little Canon video camera, I think in 2009, which is really good. That's when I started getting into video. I wasn't really into video before that. But then nowadays it's so simple, because before in the early part of the 2000s, it was complicated to run a video camera, to understand how to run this. Now you just push a button and point and shoot. And 2009, there was Oscar Grant in Oakland. He was shot by BART, a Bay Area Rapid Transit police officer, and that was on a BlackBerry. And that was one of the biggest stories that went so viral for me in the very beginning, because there was one video that came out, and then somebody sent me another video that was clear that wasn't even on the other media, and they sent it to me. And they sent it to me because I had been reporting on this, and they assumed, and I learned this later, that I was in Oakland. They're like, man, your coverage on this incident, because I was just covering day in, day out this one incident. And they're like, we thought you were in Oakland. I'm like, no, I'm in Miami. And so that showed me, wow, technology is allowing me to do this kind of work, national work, just from my own home, from my own computer, which I'm doing now. And so it was pretty good. It was pretty good. But that really, they shot this guy in the back, this Oscar Grant. The cop went to jail for manslaughter. He was released after a few months. They made a documentary on it.
Fruitvale Station was the movie. Also, I believe it won some Academy Awards so it got some nominations or recognition at least.
That was the big one, the very big one. That the shooting there was others, but that shooting that took place, shoot this guy in the back, that was big. And then then 2014 was Michael Brown, and even though that incident wasn't caught on camera, what happened was the Ferguson Police Department left Michael Brown's body on the street for hours. So all the people in that neighborhood were out there recording. And it was just going viral. And I remember a guy I used to work with, Taylor Hardy. He was a black dude. He used to work with me, and he'd call me up and go, look, this is going to be big. He's the one that told me, hey, this is going to be big. This is going to be big. And he was right. It was huge. And it's because of that reason that cops left his body there, and everyone just started saying this and that, and just basically, I don't know, they're creating their own narrative or what, because we don't really know what happened. The feds investigated it. They said this happened. It's still not clear what happened, except what we do know is, that Ferguson, that city, they did studies on this, and, they have a history of basically profiling Black people for just basically monetary purposes, just to get money for the city. So this happens a lot, especially in Missouri. It happens everywhere pretty much. But so that started coming out. That is when the mainstream media started jumping on this. It was before that they didn't want anything to do with this issue. They're like, oh no, isolated incidents, they would always say. And they couldn't ignore it anymore. After that, it was just too much. It was social media was too big, and too many people were talking about it. So now, after that, then you had some nonprofits that started. Oh, we're going to talk about law enforcement now. The media finally decided to cover this, and they ignored it for 7 years before that. And then a few years later is when I started getting shadow banned. I started getting censored. I started, my articles would get thousands of page views every day just by putting it up on Facebook, thousands of comments, thousands of likes. It was just amazing. And then from one day to the next, I was just getting maybe
a trickle. I remember I was a regular reader. I myself was a regular reader. Like, by the way, dirty little secret, most of the Miami Herald newsroom was an avid reader of PNAC and would very frequently, and I think to Carlos's dismay, fail to cite the original reporting when they would re-report stories that Carlos would break. At the time I was, of course, a Miami Herald reporter, but I wasn't covering municipal stuff. I was covering the Miami Heat. But yeah.
And the Miami Herald actually ignored my Metro Rail incident, and as well as all the corporate media, except for the Miami New Times. Mm-hmm. They pretended it didn't happen. It didn't. And here I am getting, I know they didn't they go, he's an activist, fine. But I was innocent. I mean, I had the right to take pictures. They should have at least reported it as a warning to other people. Hey, don't take pictures and you may get killed, or you have the right. They pretended it didn't happen. And that got me thinking, well, if they were to kill me, which they almost did, and I couldn't breathe, and at the time I was in good health, better health than I am now. It would work out, and I'll never forget, I was holding my body up because they were putting their body weight on me, and I had all these cuts on my hand from the escalator, and I was just, please stop, just I can't breathe, and I would have died if I was maybe just out of shape, and would they have ignored that too? Well, fuck them. That guy's just an activist, and that made me. And this was 2013. 2014 was Michael Brown. That's when they started taking it serious. So that's when all of a sudden, we're going to report on this, and they pretend now that they've been reporting on this forever. They act like, oh yeah, we've been no, they haven't, and it's. I know the truth. They know the truth. That's why they don't like me, and whatever, right?
On that point about, like, you say, like, the Herald just ignored the story completely. Another name from 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I was a janitor in Brownsville, Brooklyn, and I was talking with one of the volunteer moms who helped with the lunches for the schools. This was a little bit after Eric Garner. Just a couple of years after that. And we were talking about everything that had been going on in the community, and, like, BLM protests were a big subject. They were leading chants with the kids of I matter, to get it in their heads that their lives are not nothing. One of the volunteer moms said this wouldn't happen without the phones for one specific reason. They, like institutions of power, can't decide what you get to see and what you don't get to see anymore. In other words, that if it goes viral, if enough people see it, then it becomes a story. Like you said, like the Herald chose to ignore it when the Metro story. Now, even if they ignore it, then it's just them missing a story that they're going to get elsewhere, because it's been democratized, basically. If enough people have cameras and enough people talk about it, then it becomes a story. But I wanted to ask about, you said that you used to get a lot more traction and now it's down to a trickle. How did that process happen for you? Like, when did you notice things starting to grind down and slow down?
It started like in 2017. Maybe it started there, and it just got worse and worse. It started. Wait, when did Trump take office?
2017. January 2017.
January 2017.
When Trump took office.
Yeah.
What happened is that, and this was reported by The Intercept, that Trump was the president who started getting involved with big tech and telling them to censor stories. Biden continued, Trump continued. Now what we have is big tech basically aligns itself with the current presidential administration.
They become the gatekeeper for the administration, basically. Yeah.
So that's what's happening now. And at the time, with the Metro Rail thing, I didn't really care if the local media, the Herald, didn't report on it, because at the time I had my traffic. I had an international readership. So it was already out. And it didn't really matter. But if that happened now, where I had no platform, then nobody would know about it.
I think that what we want to talk about today has cleared the path for way more of these types of abuses too. I just want to let our listener understand what we're talking about, Gerald, when we talk about the HALO law, which is, effective on January 1st of this year. This new law, which kind of skated under our radar last year in all of our coverage. I don't think we talked about it it's just like one of those things. It's like trying to drink from a fire hose, too much shit happening. But the HALO law establishes a 25-foot buffer zone around quote unquote first responders, including law enforcement officers, firefighters, and emergency medical personnel actively performing their duties. Individuals who, after receiving a verbal warning, intentionally approach or remain within this zone with the intent to impede, threaten, or harass first responders can be charged with a second-degree misdemeanor, punishable by up to 60 days in jail and a $500 fine. Supporters argue that the law will protect first responders from interference, ensuring that they can perform their duties safely. Critics contend that the law may hinder accountability. It will hinder accountability by restricting the ability to record police activities, potentially decreasing transparency. And I think that one big thing, and I want to hear your thoughts on this, Carlos, as somebody who's been in courts of law having to, fight against these kinds of cases. The idea that, like, the ambiguity around the word harass, right? Like it's completely like so many other things I'm talking specifically about cops, because let's not fool ourselves. This isn't about people bothering a paramedic. Okay. That's not the reason that this law, or a firefighter or something. Let's cut the bullshit. This law exists because of cops and cop unions pushing for it, and because of people like you. And I think that when you give law enforcement this sort of like broad leeway to interpret things like what is harassing me, what is, that's what opens up all manner of potential abuses. But what do you think?
Well, I have a lot of thoughts on that. But number one, there are already laws in place against interfering. There are already laws against threatening. I mean, obviously, there's already laws against harassment, and the cops the cops can kill you if they perceive you to be a threat. You didn't even have to be a threat. If the court said you reasonably believe that this person was a threat, he had his hands in his pocket and whatever, then you get arrested or you get killed. So there are already laws against it. It ain't like, we never had a law against threats or harassment or interference. No, we had them in place. What this law does is make it very specific, where you have to stand 25 feet away, which, number one, are these cops going to be walking around with tape measures?
Yeah.
How are you going to determine 25? What if I'm 24, 26 feet, 20?
And one of cops' favorite things to do is to close distance with you when they see you recording. And so it's almost like, well, not almost, it is. They're in charge of what the 25 feet is. They can say, oh yeah, when I arrested him, he was 5 feet away from me. Yeah, because you took 10 steps towards the photographer.
They'll come into your face and they'll tell you, get out of my face, get that camera out of my face. The other thing is, Eric Gardner is one example. Also, George Floyd. The people who recorded that were not 25 feet. They're within the 25 feet. That girl she won a Pulitzer Prize. She was just 17 years old, and she was right there, and we saw the video, and that wasn't 25 feet. Eric Gardner, it was his friend who recorded it. He was right there talking to him. So, and they ended up retaliating against that guy,
right?
Because he had some illegal issues, but yeah. So what happens? Okay, if you just happen to be in a crowd and a guy next to you gets arrested, and that's it, are you automatically guilty? Are you automatically going to be arrested? Like if you pull out your phone, like. Yeah, we know it's obvious what this law is about. And also, when they use the word safety, they always use the word safety for this and that. They said they would drag me down the stairs in a chokehold for my safety. Safety is control.
It's narrative control. Yeah.
When a politician or a police officer says we're doing it for your safety, we're doing it to control you. And this is just to control the people, to control the narrative, which they lost control of. And now they're trying to get it back by, getting big tech involved and, censoring people like myself and now passing these laws. They're trying to get the narrative back because they had the narrative, control of the narrative for so long. And, if you work for newspapers, you know how it works. Like, Like we have to go by the police narrative. The police say this.
Right.
You may talk to the victim or someone who was arrested, but you don't know that person. You just and then the cop you're talking to, the PIO. Well, you know that person. You talk to this person every day as a reporter, so you tend to trust. I'm not saying I would, but generally the reporters would. They tend to trust the cops more because they know them. So, and then all of a sudden I came along and all these auditors came along and technology came along. And now we're seeing a different narrative. We're seeing that we got the narrative. We're seeing the truth. And that really frustrated the media. That really frustrated the politicians. It frustrated the police officers. And now they're trying to normalize things again. And it's already been done. Now we already know, the people who are paying attention already know, like, how the cops really are. We already know who they are. People know their rights. You have like that 17-year-old girl who knows her rights, and you got teenagers who were not even born when I started PINAC, but they know their rights, and they don't know who I am, but they know their rights. That wasn't the case in 2007. The case in 2007 was, because of 9/11, is that you have to comply, and how dare you even point a camera? They have the right to be private, but they're not. But I'm not photographing them on their private time. I have no interest in that. In their private time with their families, I have no interest in that. My interest is how they interact with the public. That is, obviously, we had the right to photograph that. But now
It's kind of funny, Carlos, that you brought up the idea of the PIO, and I remember his name and his voice all the time. The Miami PIO at the time of your arrest was a guy named Delrish Moss, who would go on to become chief of police where? Ferguson, exactly. Yeah, and now he's down here again. I think he's the chief of police up in Miramar now. But yeah, it's funny because they have that public face that guys like Delrish Moss, perfectly like wonderful guy if you sit down and talk to him, whatever, like, outside of his capacity of as a propagandist for law enforcement, outside of that, he's a perfectly wonderful guy, which is why he's so good at being a propagandist, but they use that sort of those good faces. Those aren't the faces that people would see before photographing police became the norm. Back then it was like, you thought of a cop and you thought of a Delrish Moss. You were like, oh yeah, that's that officer friendly type of guy. And
yes,
I think that a lot of your coverage and what happened now, I think they want to get back to being able to put forward people like that unquestionably, like, oh no, this is what law enforcement is in your community. Please don't pay any attention to these videos. Let's go ahead and throttle those. Gerald, I don't know if you saw this today. You were talking about like how tech is kind of, Silicon Valley, and a lot of these billionaires are working in lockstep to control narratives. And just today, Jeff Bezos came out and said, we're refocusing our editorial pages at the Washington Post on. By the way, I thought that he wasn't supposed to have any input on editorial decisions. But what did he say, Gerald? I think you read it.
It
right?
was we're focusing on free markets and personal liberties, which the height of irony is telling people that we're focused on personal liberties, and now I'm limiting yours to the subjects that I approve of. So what I'm by personal liberty, I don't mean the personal liberty of the journalist in question.
So, Carlos, I wonder, like, and I want to give you a chance too, because I know that you're working at a new outlet. And what is that outlet, by the way, just so that people can go visit it and see your more recent contemporary reporting?
Yes, I am writing for Atlanta Black Star, which is the largest Black-owned digital publication in the United States. And they cover everything that's of interest of Black people. It's kind of like a TMZ for Black people, I guess. So they write about celebrities and athletes. I focus on police, on the criminal justice system.
We'll link it here in the in the show notes, so folks go check that out. But I wanted to ask if you were like, because you're still tuned into a lot of this stuff, all of this stuff, you're still covering it. And are you disappointed at all by the lack of pushback, media or otherwise, that this law got? Because it really feels like, I know we're in an era where
10 years ago, I think it would have gotten a lot more.
Way more pushback, right? I mean, it feels like these laws like this, and specifically this Halo law, are just sailing through. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't surprise me, and I don't really trust the corporate media. I have absolutely no trust in the site I'm working for now is independent, it's family owned, they're not corporate. It's a big difference. It's just day and night compared to the corporate media. I'm much happier there, but yeah, it's just it's just like I always believe the media, the corporate media, doesn't want to ruin its relationships with police because they have to depend on the cops for their stories or tips. The PIO can just shut you out if he doesn't like you. Okay, I'm not going to give you that whatever information you're looking for, and then you have no story, right? We'll give it to the other publications. This happens, right? So yeah, and the media doesn't really care because they know that they have their press badges. They know they're going to be fine. They're going to be fine. They don't really. I think that a lot of the journalists, the corporate journalists, resent people like me and these activists because they believe they should be the ones doing the story, although they're actually using these videos for their own stories. And so yeah, the whole thing, it was like I even myself, when I worked for the Arizona Republic back in 2001 and 2 and 3, and I was a police reporter there. That was when the blogs started becoming very popular. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, who's going to read blogs when we're the professional writers, right? I went to school for this. And I started reading the
The
blogs.
hubris that we had, Carlos, the hubris that we had.
Yeah, and I started reading the blogs and down here when I moved back to Miami, where I'm from, and I realized, wow, they have their own communities. They're actually getting more comments than the mainstream media. They're having you have your cooking blogs, you have your sports blogs, everyone has their own different blog. I had the police blog, and there was nobody doing that before that. And so that's when I realized, okay, I started reading these blogs and I started seeing the truth. I started kind of like just putting all that arrogance behind me from the mainstream media that I had. And I no longer have, but it does still exist. It still exists that these journalists that go, well, who are they? They're not the professionals. We are the professionals. But the First Amendment doesn't say the freedom of press is only guaranteed to those who work for the corporate media. No, it's guaranteed to every single person in this country. And that is what's happening now. Freedom of the press is we have the right to record. We have the right to report. We have the right to go into City Hall or the police departments and make public records requests, just like the journalists do. Maybe most people do not have the training, which I think we should train them. I think we should educate people. And now people are getting educated on this. I wrote a story last week for Atlanta Black Star about a black man and his mom. The cops barged into their home because they had a call from somebody in the apartment building saying, oh, we heard domestic violence and screaming going on. And I don't know where the apartment is up there. It might be, I'm not sure. The cops went up there, they banged at the door, and it was a black family. They just barged in and harassed this guy. And then the actual real people were down below. It was a white couple, and they went down there, treated them very nicely, very different. It's all on video. And the point is, this guy that I interviewed, he is the one that got all of the public records request. He is the one that got the body camera footage. He was the one that got the audio from the 911 dispatch call. He was the one that got the police reports and sent it to me so I could write my story. And this guy he's just an IT guy. He's not a journalist, but he is now. And that we need more of that. We need more of that because number one, the media, they can't do it all, even if they have good intentions. You can't do it all. You can't do it all. So you should want people to do that because he actually helped me out with my story because I was able to write it and put it together and put it up on Atlanta Black Star. But without his work, it wouldn't have been that good of a story. And that's just one example. So we need more of that. We need more of that. And I wrote a book called the Citizen Journalist Photography Handbook, which tried to educate, and this is in 2014, tried to educate citizens on that. And guess what? I was not even allowed to present my book in the Miami Book Fair, even though that was happening. And even though my book was available all over the world, the English-speaking world, it was available in Australia, the UK, Ireland, Canada, the US, and corporate bookstores, but it wasn't allowed to be in the Books and Books here, the local bookstore. It was not allowed to be in the Miami-Dade Book Fair because why? Because
too subversive. Yeah, exactly. Gerald, I feel like I've been talking over you, but because this is a topic that I'm really passionate about. Mm-hmm. But did you have a question?
No. Sorry, you can cut this. I was responding to something off camera. Sorry.
Okay. Did you have a question though?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me read a couple of critical perspectives that I spotted, and some of these are names that we're familiar with, others are not. But folks who are weighing in on this law, of course, Sheriff Grady Judd of Polk County, kind of one of these celebrity sheriffs that's here in Florida. We make our sheriffs into celebrities here in Florida for some reason. We love to do that. Grady Judd said, "You can video law enforcement officers. That's your constitutional right, but you've got to stay out of their way while they're doing their jobs." Chris Knapp Graff, a public information officer at St. John's County in the fire rescue department there, highlighted the unpredictability of the emergency scenes and the necessity of the law. He said, "We don't know what's going to happen. Some of these scenes are so unpredictable. It creates that barrier of safety." I just think that I just feel like it's like, first of all, to have to even bother asking a fire captain or a fire rescue person about this. This is not about fire. This if firemen were being recorded ad nauseum and like, being posted online by citizen journalists or whatever, this law never would have happened. If paramedics were the subject of this kind of scrutiny,
traffic guards,
this never would have happened. It's the fact that it's cops. It's the fact that it's the most well-funded, most labor-wise organized, public sector. I would say even more so than teachers, more well-organized and more like deeply, protected, frankly, in their positions. And it feels like this is one of the many ways that that dissent gets kind of made invisible. Right? Like any kind of effort for accountability gets made invisible. It's happening a lot. We're seeing, more and more ways to evade scrutiny. And I know that this is like kind of hand in glove with everything happening right now. But I don't know, like how would somebody, will there be, I guess my question is like, do you think that there will be a backlash to this, or will we kind of fall into line like the 2003 to 2004 2005 America, where we were just like, oh well, if I don't see it, it ain't happening. It's like I don't know. I wonder if we'll just go back to thinking that cops are just doing their jobs perfectly, and yeah, I don't know what the backlash to this will be.
No, I don't see that, for the sole reason as the younger generations are not going to buy into it. The younger generations, Generation Z, and was it Generation Alpha, or even, the ones that are coming up, they're not buying into that at all. They know what's up. That they didn't grow up like we grew up with cop shows. The cops are heroes. They grew up with YouTube videos that we're showing them, and they have a completely different mindset. They know their rights. And I know this because when I write my articles for Atlanta Black Star, I see all the comments and people I talk to, I interview, they know their rights. And these are mostly Black people. So Black people have been going through police abuse forever. And so they have a very, very keen insight into this. But the young people, and also we've become more of a diverse country where we're not as segregated as we used to be, even just by choice, by neighborhood. Even though there's no law, I grew up with Cubans and Hispanics, and my Black friends at school grew up in their neighborhood. We didn't really hang out after school. But now people, because of the internet, people are connecting with each other, finding common interests, aside from, just you live next to each other. And so people are learning. And so I want to see what's going to happen. I can't wait to see who's the first person who's going to be arrested for this and how they're going to challenge that. Because if you get arrested and, you were not 25 feet away,
right.
Do you have to go back and measure it? I mean, because you have to be is it down to inches now? Or are we going on, well, you're 1 inch over. It becomes like baseball in a way, where is this a foul or a fair ball? But this is much more serious. So, yeah, I mean, the law, DeSantis, he just huffs and puffs and just does all his stupid things. But people, the majority of mainstream society, and this is more of the older people like our age, they will probably be fine with it. They're fine because they don't want to get involved with cops. They're always going to be yes sir, no sir. Yeah, they cannot understand why someone like me would put myself in this situation when I could have walked away, which I had the chance. And that's the other thing. The videos I've done over the years, I've noticed when Black people get harassed, they're not allowed to walk away. Give us your ID. Give us your ID. Let me see your ID, because they want to check them for warrants. And all the times I was arrested, they get out. And I was like, no, I have the right. No. And then they get so angry that they arrest me. But I had the chance to walk away. And a lot of the people, a lot of my peers, a lot of people who were journalistic peers, you should have complied. You should have walked away. Why did you question that? Well, why the hell are we celebrating the 4th of July and our freedoms if we cannot exercise our freedoms? That is my aggravation. Is like we pretend we're free, but we won't even dare stand up for our freedom, our rights when it comes down to it. And that just bothered me for so long before 2007. I moved back from Arizona in 2004 to actually help out because I was really anti-Bush at the time. I was trying to help Kerry win, and so I moved back from 2004 to 2007. I would go around Miami with my camera, take pictures, because I had lived away for 10 years. And I was getting to know Miami again. And I was always getting harassed by cops, security guards. I was on a bridge taking a picture of the Miami River. You can't do that. Cops would come, and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, yes, I can, but okay, whatever. I'll leave. But then that one night I said, you know what? No way. No, I got the right to be here. And I told them, you do your job and let me do my job. I was even talking to them. They're the ones who started talking to me. I was taking my pictures. I wasn't hiding, but I wasn't talking. I wasn't going to, I was an experienced police reporter, not to say anything to them. I mean, let them do their job. I'm not going to interfere, but I am going to document. And they left the other guy alone. The other guy they were arresting, they left him alone. They came after me, 5 of them, and they just beat the shit out of me. And it changed everything. It did. And it's still, people who have never been through that will never understand the trauma that you go through, that trauma that you're left with, because we're so, like, during those times when I was getting beat up, I was thinking, okay, is a police officer going to help? No. If you're getting beat up on the
Where are
street,
you going to get help? Yeah.
yeah, if you're getting beat up on the middle of the street by some random stranger, you're like, okay, God, please have a cop drive by, right? Please, somebody. But here it's like, well, no one's going to, even if they're not. If a cop drives by, they're just going to jump in and help the cops. That's how they're trained.
I'll tell you from my own time when I covered cops with the Miami Herald. I remember one story that I got called, and this goes back to the idea that they always want to put their best foot forward, and it's always some layer of propaganda that's being pushed. And one of this, and as a dutiful cops reporter, you have to go and write down and stenograph everything that they say,
Right.
and that's what's expected. The cops have made I believe it was like the North Division. They made this enormous bust. This was like maybe 2008, 2009, and it was millions of dollars in stolen lawn and hardware equipment, just really banal, boring, like whatever, weed whackers and riding mowers and stuff, where a landscaper would turn his back and turn around and it was all his gear was gone. And they found this huge ring and they busted them. So good on the police, right? And I covered this huge public basically like a day where they let the public know, if you had something stolen, it's probably here. Bring your receipts or anything that has a serial number. And at the end of the day, I would say about 75% of the stuff was still there. And I asked the cops, and they said, oh yeah, we're going to keep trying to get it back to them. But then I asked like this public advocate that was there, and they were like, oh, well, the reason that all that stuff is still there is because the cops don't even bother to collect the serial number or the information for most of these things. Like when you call a cop for something like that, it's like, well, then what even is your job? You just to check off a box that you showed up and like responded to my phone call when my shit got took. And it's like, what is the duty that is being impeded by somebody taking, it's confounding. It's infuriating, Carlos. I've always kind of felt a kindred spirit with you and always read your stuff when it was when PNAC was in its heyday, because like it always struck a chord with me. It's infuriating. And I think that this augurs very badly for the future. This combined with a bunch of other sort of like the way that, I don't know if you saw this, Gerald, but somebody, there was a reporter, it might've been Ken Klippenstein, who got an email back from a FOIA request. And the email came from the government FOIA department, from the alias. And it was like, it basically said, LOL, no one works here anymore. And it was just like, you just can't even get a Freedom of Information Act request like pushed through anymore. And it feels like it's all, like I said before, part and parcel with.
I wanted to ask you, Carlos, because I agree with you when you said that the younger generations are not buying what they're selling. I do think that's largely true. However, I'm also struck when we were going over how we even missed this in the first place, that 10 years ago, there would have been more pushback against a law like this. It was front and center in people's mind. And I think it's partly a desire of people, after the lockdowns lifted and after COVID, of people desiring to get back to a more like quote unquote normal, way of life, of wanting to move on with things.
Pretend everything's fine.
Right.
Yeah.
Basically,
Yeah.
Yes. What do you think it would take because I don't think it will stay like this forever. I do think there will be an incident. I don't know what it will be, and I don't know the year, but what do you think it's going to take for there to be even a delayed response? Because it obviously would be delayed to a law like this.
Yeah, it'll take another incident. It'll
Yeah.
take somebody getting arrested, and it's all on video. You have this guy, you have other people videoing, so you're going to see exactly what took place. There's cameras, security cameras all over the place, and it's going to take somebody having to challenge this law. I think the reason right now, the reason things have calmed down is because everything has gotten so expensive that people are stressed out. People are just trying to survive. People are like living one paycheck away from living on the streets. Homelessness has increased at record levels. And all these politicians want to do from both the left and the right is fund the police. Biden gave the cops billions and billions of dollars in pandemic money that was supposed to go to small business owners and to appease the cops and appease the Republicans. But what happens is when you, like in any industry, if you basically just hire more journalists or cops or carpenters or whatever, you have to lower the hiring standards because there's certain quality that not everyone is going to have those skills. That's just how it is. So you lower the standards. Except when it comes to cops, it ain't like, okay, I'm a writer, I may make a mistake. No, cops will kill you. But everyone's like, oh, because the solution to all the problems are cops, when the real solution is addressing poverty, when the real solution is addressing mental illness, which is half the people that are killed by cops are having mental episodes because they're off their meds and they're going through financial stress, and their family doesn't know it, so they call the cops. The cops just show up, oh, you didn't comply, and they shoot them when these people are not in the right state of mind. So of course they're not going to comply. Cops escalate. So we're very simplistic in this country, like more cops, more prisons, and now so we need to educate ourselves, and I believe, and I used to be a Democrat, and I've never been a Republican or a right winger, but I believe now as citizens we have to actually come together with Republican voters to go against the corporate government class, because it's becoming, what I'm seeing now is that you have the Democrats and Republicans actually coming together almost, right? And they're just performatives, their performances, they act like this and that, but they're really funded by the corporations. Then you have like the Trump voters who are very pissed off, and they got their own issues. And I think a lot of them are misled and indoctrinated. And you have a lot of people on the left who are pissed off. But we need to get past these little stupid differences about trans, whatever.
Yeah.
That doesn't matter.
It's so funny, Carlos, like you're seeing people interact with you on your Facebook and on PNX Facebook was always funny because you had a very strong, Jared, his site had a very strong right-wing libertarian contingent of readers. Yeah, they loved his stuff, but they would fight with him. And
Right.
He would fight with Carlos. They'd be like, oh, this is some liberal bullshit. And you'd be like, what are you talking about?
I remember in the period of time, Carlos, that you're talking about, the big libertarian issue with cops was civil asset forfeiture. That like they were worried about loss of property in the event of no, not, which is kind of a sad thing to say, that of all the things they could think that they wouldn't want to lose, it was their property.
Was the car, yeah. Exactly.
It was a big deal, though. I mean,
yeah.
thousands of dollars just taken from them, and with no charges.
Right.
It's like, we don't have any real like probable cause that you're a drug dealer, but I believe it, and I'm going to take your money.
Right.
And how is that legal, man?
And now you have to prove that your money isn't guilty of being, but the civil asset forfeiture, the more you dig into the legalities of it, is a disgusting, decrepit thing that we have in this country, where it's like you have to exonerate your money. If you ever see the cases, the civil asset forfeiture cases, it's not against a person, it's against a city of Miami or state of Florida versus $100,000. It's not versus a person. So you have to act on behalf of your assets and like hire a lawyer for your car, basically, to get your car back or whatever.
They're stealing your money.
Yeah.
It's armed robbery. They're stealing your money. And I've seen it happen many times on video, and it's very infuriating. I remember there's one guy in Vegas. I guess he won money in the casinos, and he had a lot of money. He was going back to California, and he was just some Asian dude. And yeah, they took his money, and they were arrogant. I know you look at the cop's history, and this cop has a horrible history. So, if these cops really wanted to get real respect from the people, they need to start disciplining and cleaning out their bad cops. Well, what they do is protect the cops. Every police department has dirty cops on their payroll. That doesn't mean every cop is bad. No, it's not. People always say, Carlos, you say all the cops are bad. They're not all bad. No, there's a lot of good individuals, decent people who are cops. I have friends who are cops, but they're part of the corrupt culture of policing, which I will never, you'll never change my mind on that. And then what happens is, and I interviewed a former police captain years ago. He told me something I will never forget. He said, of all the people that joined the police academy, 1/3 go into the police academy because they want to make a difference. They believe they want to be a good cop. They want to change their community. You have another third that go in there because they need a job. They're out of high school. They don't have a job. Why not? Then you have another third that go in there because they seek power. And these are the people who move up in the ranks naturally, right? They seek power. The other guys are just, oh, just, I'm fine, just getting paid, being an officer, doing my job. But these guys want power. So they're the ones who protect the dirty cops at the bottom. And that's happening everywhere. And the police chiefs tend to be kind of like the PIOs. They tend to be more personable.
Yeah.
They tend to be more politically, they tend to be
more diplomatic.
Right?
Yeah, it's presentable. Yeah, exactly.
Right. But, they protect the bad cops. I mean, so the cops believe they can do whatever they want. Even when Biden was president and the DOJ was doing all these consent decrees, which, is just a lot of money investigating cops, that nothing really happens. They did it to Miami PD. Nothing ever changes. It's like, oh, yeah, we think you should do this. We think you should do that. And the cops are like, well, okay, well, we're going to continue doing what we're going to do. And they do. They do. And so it's just a lot of money for the taxpayers. If anything, the police departments get more money because we need you to train, and then you train your cops, but the government will never tell the cops how to do the training because they're afraid of the cops. So the cops will say, okay, we'll train them the way we train them. It's the same way, just basically comply or die. That's way. Pain compliance is what they call it. So if someone is smoking a cigarette on a train platform or whatever, and you tell them to put it out, this is just one example. They'll start doing they're twisting your arm, and if you continue resisting, it continues. Or they say, in my case, where I have the right to take pictures, and they say, no, you don't. And then I'm like, I'm not going to leave here at the train station. Well, they start doing their pain compliance until I die or until I comply, whatever comes first. And they're fine. They're justified in doing that. They say, we can kill you because you didn't abide by our orders, whether it's lawful or unlawful. And, so they got all this power, and they get more and more power, and with all these prisons and more police being hired and everything. And we're defunding mental illness, mental health for people. We're defunding
and the support systems and all that stuff is
the LA Fire Department. I mean, most famously recently.
Yeah.
And the irony of all this stuff is the cops are being sued so much that they're paying us so much money in settlements that they're defunding themselves. They are defunding themselves. They're like the LA Times, like a couple of months ago, had an editorial, surprisingly enough, where the LA Times came out and said, we're losing money, our city, because our cops are crazy and we're paying too much in settlements. And this happens all over. And Chicago is a great example of that too.
Even like in LA or in Chicago or in places like Miami, those like multi-million-dollar settlements can kind of get like lost in the cracks and maybe papered over because there's such enormous budgets and everything like that. But like you'll read about like smaller municipalities where, I mean, they'll literally have to like let go of a couple of teachers, or they'll have to like let go of people because a cop on the payroll does some ridiculous violation and will get a judgment against them for $5 million. And that's an enormous hunk of their budget, their annual budget. And sure enough, the cop is protected, doesn't lose his job, might be found culpable, but at the very worst, he might have to move a couple of towns over and get a job with another department. It's all very concerning, but we're getting to the top of the hour. And before we go, let's end on a good note. What people know Carlos from his reporting on this issue that we've been talking about for the last hour. They might not know, unless they're friends with him on Facebook, that he's a foodie. Carlos, where's the place in Miami for me to go eat? Give us a restaurant that people don't know about.
Oh, man, what kind of food are you looking for?
How about pizza? I see you've been on a pizza tear. Yeah.
Oh, Miami pizza. Miami pizza would be Cuban pizza. That's very heavy. I don't recommend it. I love Cuban food, but I don't care too much for Cuban pizza. And I tried a new place last week called Emmy's Squared Pizza on Miracle Mile. Is Detroit style pizza, which is very good.
Ooh,
very
nice.
Pizza. And I don't even go out that much. I actually do more cooking at home because it's getting very expensive out there.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, with that said, Carlos Miller, thank you very much for joining us. We're going to link to Atlanta Black Star in the show notes. Is there anywhere else where you want people to go check you out and be able to follow you and keep up with you?
Just on my Facebook page. I don't really post that much these days. On Facebook, especially, I'm just, as you probably know, I'm just posting food photos. Every once in a while, I may talk politics because my experience is it was just too divisive, and people end up, it just, I don't need the conflict. I don't need the.
Yeah, who needs that?
I just want to be peaceful, and I write my stories for Atlanta Black Star. Just write my stories, and the great thing about that is when I talk to these individuals I interview, they're so grateful. They go, "Thank you for getting our voice out there. Thank you for putting our voice out there," because these mainstream people won't do it. And that to me is more important than winning any journalistic prize or having, I work for like the corporate media, the
Right.
legacy media. No, what's more important for me is to help individual people who to provide them with a voice, because fortunately I know how to write stories, and I know this topic so well because I've gone through it. So yeah, it's good. So yeah, it'd be great. I mean, if you can link to
For sure.
I'll send you a link to the stories I wrote for them, because they have a link. It's on my Facebook page.
Very cool. So check out Carlos. Carlos, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me on.